today's show. In today's show, we have invited our guest, who is Brains Muchemwa. Brains Muchemwa is one of the prominent economists, a banker, and an entrepreneur. Mr. Brains Muchemwa, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Shepherd.
Mr. Brains Muchemwa, you had a very promising career as a banker and an economist. Why did you leave your employment?
That's not an easy question. I think people are different. When I started working, I had a very interesting career, as you have said. I worked in Zimbabwe, I worked in the region, but I think you get to a point where you just get tired of working and you believe you can probably start something, and that's really what drove me to just venture into entrepreneurship. I had this passion to just create things and be my own boss, so to say.
Thank you very much. As a banker and as an economist, you have come across a number of entrepreneurs who have struggled with the seed startup capital. How did you overcome that as an entrepreneur, and what's your advice in terms of people? How can they overcome this particular challenge?
That's not an easy challenge, but I always say that in life, it's not about capital that is important. I think what is more important is the idea. As long as you've got a burning idea, an idea that makes you lose sleep every day, you will surely be able to attract capital. I look at it from the perspective of the law of attraction. If you really want capital and you've got a very burning idea, you've got an idea that makes you lose sleep, capital will follow you. It's more like when I started the business myself. I started in 2010 thereabout, the microfinance business at that time. It was a time when we didn't have any US dollars, and I thought I would venture into the financial services sector. What I had was the idea that I wanted to be able to lend, to help other small entrepreneurs, help individuals realize their dreams. And I didn't have much capital, so to say, but because the idea was good and the time was right, I was able to attract capital. So that would be my advice. You just need the right idea and the right level of motivation. Once you have that, definitely you'll be able to attract capital. But it's not just that easy. You as well need to understand how to fund, or the funding requirements of your business, and where to go to look for the money.
Mr. Brains, entrepreneurs, are they born or they are made?
I think I don't believe that entrepreneurs are born. They make themselves. No one makes an entrepreneur. They just make themselves. When I look at the many friends of mine that run their own businesses, I don't think they're born entrepreneurs. They've just been fighting their own battles, and they've been making themselves.
Viewers, we've come to the end of the first segment of our show. Please remain tuned to the channel as we continue with our discussion in the next segment with Mr. Brains Muchemwa, who is one of the renowned world economists. Welcome back to the second segment of our show, where we are talking to Mr. Brains Muchemwa, who is a renowned economist, a banker, and an entrepreneur. Mr. Brains Muchemwa, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much.
Right, Mr. Brains Muchemwa, as you run your businesses, there are some of the challenges that you face on a day-to-day basis. Would you briefly talk to our viewers? What are some of the challenges that you face in terms of your day-to-day projects or investments?
I think the major challenge that we've had in this market in particular is the environment. So you spend more time worrying about the environment than worrying about the business. And if you look at the 10 of the economic events since 2017 thereabout, life has not generally been easy for those that are running businesses. You are looking at the fact that the cost drivers of many businesses have been going up at a time where the revenues on the other side have not been increasing in line with the cost, and that has really been squeezing margins for most of the businesses. So that's one big problem that we have in running a business in Zimbabwe, where you spend more time worrying about the environment, what the policymakers are likely to do, what they are likely not to do. But on the other hand, I think the human resources has been a big issue as well, from my own experience. I think we now have a culture in this country where people don't really want to work hard. They just want to cut corners, make deals, get rich fast. You get a situation where once people are employed, the moment they get settled, they're no longer interested in the business, in running, in what it is that is giving them their salary. They're interested in setting up their own little things around the business itself. You see, so that is where we have got an integrity problem in this country, and I think it's a problem that is really affecting many businesses. Unfortunately, most of these shenanigans are not easy to prove, but that definitely has been a big issue in business, and in particular in my own businesses as well.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Brains. Now, there's never been a business person, an entrepreneur who has run a business without losing money. In your own case, would you have instances where you would want to share with us how you have lost money?
To be honest with you, I've lost money in many ventures, directly or otherwise, you know, because at one time I ran a microfinance institution. I had instances where people would come up with seemingly lucrative businesses, and they would say, look, I don't have capital, neither do I have the collateral, but it's a business that we can work on and see how it goes. And in many other instances, I've really been buying into those ideas, and before you know it, you lose money. I've lost money in quite a number. I've tried ceramics business, I've lost money. I've tried IT, you know, the apps, I've lost money in there. I've not made any money out of it. I've tried many other businesses, and look, I think what is important is that you have to understand that in life and in business, you don't win every time. Sometimes you try, and you try so hard, you put your everything, and then still you lose money. But above all, I think what is more important is that some of these businesses I've been getting into because I had, you know, this gut feeling that look, this business can generate value, can give me some money, etc. And then you discover once you are already stuck in there that look, I might not have done the appropriate research, you know, to as would be required when starting a new business. So those are lessons that we've learned, but it doesn't stop me from feeling like I need to start from starting new businesses. I'm still thinking and toying around. You know, as an entrepreneur, you know, you need to diversify, especially in this particular market where fundamentals change now and again. And as long as you're not a market leader and you're not a monopoly, then you have no right to, or no reason whatsoever to remain stuck in your business, in one line of business. So you need to diversify the income streams.
I'm going to be unfair in my next question to you, Mr. Muchemwa. You seem to have briefly answered my question, but my next question is going to be, when you tend to get into a new venture,
Yes.
into a new investment,
Yes.
what informs your decision? Is it the banker, is it the economist in you, or there are certain things that you look at before you get into a new business?
I'm motivated by the desire to make money, and then of course coupled with creating value. So 3/4 of the time, to be honest with you, I see a lot of opportunities, maybe because I talk to a lot of people and I understand the environment and I understand the other businesses that can generate and create value. So that is what has really been motivating me to get into businesses. For example, I've gotten into property development, not necessarily because I love building, but because an opportunity had arisen where, because of inflation, one could borrow the mortgages, you know, the real value of mortgages would be eroded by inflation over time, etc. You see, so those are some of the issues that I look at when I start a business. Some of them, it's just by chance, you know, you're just you're just probably just looking at financials of a monopoly in the market and just look at it and say, surely if this person is the monopoly and they have 100% of the market, I can just get in and get 1% and I'll be happy. If the figures make sense and can give you a reasonable return, then you get it. But it's not always that you get in and make money. Like I said, I've been into funny businesses and I've lost money. But I think the philosophy is, when you are investing money, you need to have an understanding of the minimum that you require and the maximum that you can put at risk, because when you are starting a business, you are putting capital at risk. And I think what is important is to understand the maximum capital that you can put at risk and understand that if I lose this money, then look, I'm not down and out completely. But of course it depends with the businesses. There are others that really take the last gamble, and some they make it, and others, of course, once they lose it, then they're done. Especially in this market, raising capital is not easy, and finding the right people to believe in you That's one issue. So you find that capital is another issue, but the friends around you are more important as well. So 3/4 of the time you might have friends that are always discouraging you. But when I started the microfinance business in 2010, about a friend of mine would come and say, "My friend, are you crazy? Who do you think will come and borrow money from me at 15% and not go to a bank and get money at 15% per annum and not per month as you would be wanting to run your business?" You see, so those are the issues. You really need the right to allow the right noise into your ears as you start a business. 3/4 of the time, the very people around you that you have that know you very well are always discouraging. They never see that person in you that can change things, a person who can create value. So I think that's one thing that I've really been trying to avoid in terms of just letting my immediate friends know. The other people, they wouldn't they always encourage you, but your immediate friends 3/4 of the time, they just believe that you're just taking too many things on your hands, etc. Like I told you, I'm now getting into beer. I want to be brewing beer. When I grew up, my mother used to brew. We used to brew beer in the village. I used to, to collect cow dung, set the fire, and those chiwan, what we call chiwan, you see. And look, when you look at that business, it's a big business in this economy. And there are very few people that have really been getting into it. Many have left it to the monopolies in the sector. And I'm looking at it, for example, as one other business that I can just try my luck, call it luck. If it works, fine. If it doesn't work, it's okay. Look, I've lost money already in this particular business because I paid someone to provide the equipment, the machinery, they bungled up, So I've lost part of the money already, but look, I'm not losing the interest and the vision.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brains Muchemwa. Viewers, we've come to the end of our second segment of the show. Please stay tuned as we continue talking to Mr. Brains Muchemwa, a renowned economist, an entrepreneur, and a business person. In the third segment, we're going to talk about coronavirus. He's also going to share a bit of advice in terms of how can you go around Zimbabwean economy in terms of investment and business. Viewers, welcome to the third and final segment of Entrepreneurship Show. Today, we still have got Mr. Brains Muchemwa, an economist, a banker, and an entrepreneur. Mr. Brains Muchemwa, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Brains Muchemwa, this show would not be complete if we are not going to talk about coronavirus. This virus has wreaked havoc. Its impact on companies, economies, is very huge. We have heard it, and so many companies closing borders. What is the impact of this particular virus?
You see, when you look at the coronavirus, I think what is important is to look at it within the context of Zimbabwe and its major trading partners. And in particular, I think you would know that our major trading partner is South Africa. And of course, but South Africa itself derives as well its raw materials from around the world. It's not that it just derives from, the goods that it sells to Zimbabwe are not necessarily made from the local inputs in South Africa. So I think it will be too close to call to look at the impact of the coronavirus on the global and local economy. I think it's definitely going to shave off a bit of the global output, because when you look at the lockdowns that are happening in Europe at the moment, that have happened in China, that is definitely going to disrupt a lot in terms of the global supply chains, especially when you look at the position of China and its influence in the global trade and commerce. But for Zimbabwe in particular, to be honest with you, I'm quite hopeful that the vaccine or the vaccine will be found quite soon, and that will not need to have a lockdown as with what is happening in the likes of Italy and Spain. But in terms of the impact on the business, look, as long as businesses are going to close and as long as the supply chains are going to be disrupted in particular from South Africa, we are definitely going to see an impact on the economy. But you have to look at it within the broader context of the current economic activities in Zimbabwe. Considering that we already have high inflation, the exchange rate has not been stable. The output has already been shrinking on account of the macroeconomic fundamentals. The impact of the coronavirus will not be felt as much in Zimbabwe from an economic perspective as it would be felt in other more stable economies.
Okay.
When prices start rising in Zimbabwe for whatever, on anything, on account of the coronavirus, for example, the rise will not be as bad as that which we've been experiencing on account of high inflation that is emanating from excessive money supply in the economy. Even the exchange rate, when you look at it, I'm not expecting a situation where the coronavirus is going to hit our exchange rate more than how money supply has already been hitting our exchange rate, domestic money supply. So I'm not very much worried. It's a global pandemic, whatever they call it, epidemic or whatever it is, and I think we are not immune. The fact that now travel is seamless, goods and people are moving, with much ease, we are definitely not going to be immune. And I think the major issue is that our government has been quite slow in terms of taking measures to prevent the spread. In particular, our borders have remained, or our airports have remained largely open. See, in China, they've actually closed it off. You can't be going to Beijing. Even if you're in China, you can't really be moving from one region to the other. In Italy, it's the same. So, as a country as well, I think we need to then get to a point where we say to ourselves, do we have the right financial resources, personnel, and even the medical supplies to fight the virus? I don't think we do, especially when you look at the state of our hospitals. So there's a point where the government has to be a bit more proactive and work towards minimizing the movement of people, especially from those countries that are the hardest hit. Other countries in the region have already taken, steps like South Africa.
You are an economist, and it would not be fair to my viewers if we are not going to talk about Zimbabwean economy. The Minister of Finance has come up recently with a recent fiscal statement or intervention. As a business person out there listening and watching our show, is the government floated the rate? What is really going on?
So that's not an easy question, in particular on the intentions of the government. But I think the intention, I can comment on the intention of the government. You see, in this particular context, 3/4 of the time, there is usually a huge difference between what the government says it wants to do and what it eventually goes on to do. So, but I'll just look at it from what the minister has presented. So the minister has, or the policymakers have actually seen the need to liberalize the exchange rate more by having a managed float, right? Why? Because the parallel exchange rate, where most of the deals are happening anyway, had increased to around 40, whilst the interbank had remained at 18. So the minister thought there was need to intervene. So in terms of whether the minister has floated the rate or not, that is the intention. But what is going to then be implemented is something else. We have had many instances in this country where a policy is pronounced, but what is then implemented is totally the opposite of what would have been implemented. But if I can just talk about the possible impact of that on business if it is eventually floated. So when you have a managed float, I think what is important to understand is that the government needs to have reserves, because a managed float is not a free floating exchange rate. It's an exchange rate where the government would look at the broad macroeconomic objective, the inflation target, the exchange rate target, and then intervene at instances where the market will be going outside the desired direction. So one of the preconditions to running a successful managed float would be having foreign exchange reserves. Unfortunately, as a country, we have nothing. In fact, we have nothing in terms of reserves. So what it means is that the central bank will not be able to intervene in the market to stabilize the exchange rate, notwithstanding that it's a managed float. So that's one handicap that we are going to, or that comes with the managed float within the context of a country that has no reserves. However, there are positives actually that will come if at all the exchange rate is going to be floated. We have had a lot of subsidies in the market that have created a lot of distortions, in particular on the exchange rate. So when you look at the dynamics of the exchange rate has been depreciating more than anything else on account of excessive growth in domestic money supply. And this domestic money supply has been emanating from government dishing out subsidies. We have a lot of subsidies in this market on fuel, we've got a lot of subsidies on maize, we've got a lot of subsidies on mealie meal, we've got a lot of subsidies even on farming inputs, etc. So all these combined have injected a lot of unproductive domestic money supply. But considering that our exports and our other inflows of foreign currency are not increasing at the same rate that we are printing or we are generating domestic money supply, the exchange rate has been depreciating. So I think what is more important for the government is to understand that the exchange rate can only stabilize within our context if and only if they commit to reach or to having restraint on money supply growth. Anything else that we are going to do, whether it's banning the fungibility of shares or whatever it is, in my own view, will not be able to stabilize the exchange rate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muchemwa. Now my last question would be you talking to aspiring business people, aspiring entrepreneurs, but not only that, we have got other business people who may still be struggling in terms of running their business. What sort of advice, motivation, and any other information that you want to share with our viewers at the moment?
I think what is important in running a business is not easy. I think that's one thing that I need to make out clear there, that running a business is not an easy exercise. It's not an easy pastime. I think the most important thing when running a business, or for those that are still setting up, is to be passionate about the business that you want to run. As long as you are not passionate about the business, as long as you don't have time to run the business, as long as you don't have the interest to see it grow and generate value for you, you will not be successful. A business needs to be looked after, just the same way that you look after a newly born baby. Every other minute you need to be paying attention to the baby and all that. You see, that is exactly what a business requires. As long as you're not passionate about it, believe you me, I've lost money, like I told you earlier, in other businesses that I invested, and when I sit back and look, I actually see that I never had the right passion. I didn't have the burning desire to see the businesses. So that's the most important thing. Capital is not an issue. The most important thing is the passion, the desire. You need to have the burning desire. And then the next issue now is to manage the cost, setting up the business. You need to be able to look at the most minimal or cost-effective way of starting a business. So you find there are instances where before you start a business, you start renting expensive office space or factory space, and before you know it, you go for 2-3 months before you start the business, and all your money is chewed up, and you can't start the business. So that's one issue as well that businesses have to look at. The funding requirements, they have to be within the confines of the entrepreneur, or within the confines of their capacity to finance it. Without which, then these are some of their good ideas that will eventually be washed away, by the many challenges that we face in our daily lives. And of course, the last issue is that I think businesses, they need the right personnel. Whenever you start a business, you need the right people in the right positions. The moment you don't have the right people in the right positions, 3/4 of the time, you will then start to think that the business does not work, or the idea is not a good idea, or you start even blaming the economy when in fact it's about the structures of the business. So, but look, running a business doesn't have one formula. You ask someone, they will tell you a totally different perspective. But those are the 3 issues that I think the people really need, those that are starting up, they need to focus on. And maybe lastly, for all people that want to start businesses, and when they see people that have started businesses, I think what they need to understand is that they have to start. Sure. The most important thing is to start. Yeah, you will never be able to run a business without starting. And my thinking is that the most important thing, once you have your idea, you have to start. And there's a point where you say, today I'm starting. But
thank you very much.
Where it takes you, something else.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time. Viewers, we have come to the end of our 3rd and final segment of Entrepreneurship Couch, where we're talking to Mr. Brains Muchemwa. Please continue to subscribe and look out for our next shows.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.